To our board members and youth councillors, it's good to see you all here, and we've managed to squeeze in this meeting before the youth councillors complete their term of office. So I'm grateful to all of you for making this time in your diaries. Could I give a special welcome to my counterpart, Youth Council Chair Hannah Burse, and Nick Morris's counterpart, Ellie Wadsworth, the Youth Council's Vice Chair. Hannah and Ellie will present items and chair items 2 and 3. And can I remind members that the meeting is being recorded and will be available for subsequent viewing online. Hopefully by this stage we are all familiar with online meetings and everything will run smoothly, it says, but already hasn't done. We have a smaller number of people here, but given the problems we've had this morning, it would be good that if everybody keeps their videos off, their cameras off, and their microphones off when they're not speaking. Can you type speak in the chat function or use the raise your hand function if you wish to contribute? And Stephen will be assisting me to ensure I get to everybody. But if all else fails, put your camera on and wave, and that'll indicate that you wish to speak. Stephen, can you tell us the attendance from the Community Planning Partnership Board, please?
Yeah, morning, Leader, thank you. We have apologies from Colin Cook, Laura Douglas, Sheena Horner, Craig McGoldrick, but Commander Jim Anderson is substituting. Professor Griggs and Jane Morrison are being represented by John Evans. We've got Liz Manson representing Derek Crichton today. DG Housing Sector is represented by Alan Glasgow, and we've obviously got Mark Malloy and Regan Jackson here from the Young People's team. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Hannah for the Youth Council attendance. Hannah.
Morning. We've got Mark is gonna do this section if that's all right.
Thanks, Hannah. In fact, thanks, Leader. The Youth Council members that are represented this morning is Chloe Allison, who represents Stranraer and the Rins, Mia Beattie from Annandale North, Hannah Burse, who is the Chair of the Youth Council and the member of the Scottish Youth Parliament for Galloway and Weston Fries, Thomas Payne, who represents Nithward, Ellie Wandsworth, who's the Vice Chair of the Youth Council and represents Mid Galloway and Wigton West, and Lucy Waugh, who also represents Nithward. And we have apologies from Roxy Wilson, who represents Stranraer and the Rins.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'll hand over to Hannah and Ellie for item 2. Hannah and Ellie.
Hello, my name is Ellie Wadsworth and I'm one of the youth councillors for Mid Galloway and Wigton West Ward and the Vice Chair of the Youth Council. I'm presenting today alongside Hannah Burse, Youth Council Chair and MSYP for Galloway and Weston Fries. Our presentation today is going to cover the first term of the Youth Council from the election in 2019 to now. The Youth Council has places for 35 young people, 24 ward youth councillors, 7 nominated youth councillors and 4 members of the Scottish Youth Parliament. We have a leadership group that includes 1 ward youth councillor from each locality area, 1 nominated youth councillor and 1 MSYP. The chair and vice chair are then elected by the whole membership. The weekly commitment of the Youth Council member is 3 hours per week, and before the pandemic, we had only met as a regional group 6 or 7 times in person, before moving online to online sessions in March last year. The first aim of the Youth Council is to involve young people in decision-making process. Advocating for young people to have the opportunity to become meaningfully involved, it's not about double-checking things with young people. It's about working better with us to come up with options on how services could be delivered. Not just the people involved in the Youth Council, but young people who are accessing the services on a daily basis. Our second aim is to represent the diverse voices of young people throughout the region. We are proud to have a mixed membership with people of all different ages, education status and family backgrounds. And most importantly, not everyone has the same views. We have a responsibility to support organisations and decision makers to find out the views of young people in our local communities.
From May to early August 2019, our main goal was to get to know one another and work through how the Youth Council would operate over the course of our term. We published operational procedures, meeting schedules and membership agreements to make sure we were accountable. During the rest of 2019, we attended most of the Council's transformation events, contributed to Dumfries and Galloway's cultural strategy, scored applications for the holiday food programme, held ward meetings with elected members across the region. Some of our highlights throughout this time were planning the Roots volunteer gathering that saw over 90 young activists come together from all corners of the region, planning and delivering a half-day workshop at the Children, Young People and Power Conference in partnership with Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway, and delivering advocacy training sessions for young people involved in the community transport project in the Stewartry.
In January 2020, the Youth Council designed and delivered postcard consultations across all ward areas to find out the priorities of young people who live, work and study in our communities. From this, we were able to create our local ward and nominated action plans that outlined what we were hoping to achieve by the end of our terms. In February, we held our first joint council meeting between the council and the Youth Council. And during this time, we were able to have discussions with elected members and agree to progress some key actions that would benefit young people across Dumfries and Galloway. The COVID-19 pandemic affected everything and everyone, and we will be the first to admit that in the first few months, many members of the Youth Council felt overwhelmed about what was happening across the world. It was difficult on an individual and organisational level to know what to do during this time. Although we worked on many projects from March to August, one of our main pieces of work was the research project that aimed to measure the impact of COVID-19 had on young people in Dumfries and Galloway. This was something we worked in partnership to do alongside the Council, Regional Parent Forum, NHS and Third Sector.
The key findings from this were that over 55% of young people stated that they'd increased their use of social media over the pandemic. While social media helped some young people feel more connected, it also caused many young people to feel more isolated. Over 40% stated that they were worried all or most of the time about their mental health, with over 30% worried all or more most of the time about the mental health of others. 40% of young people stated that they were worried all or most of the time about things not going back to normal, and 18 months on, there's still many people feeling unsure about the future. There wasn't one experience of the pandemic. Like children and adults, young people had different experiences depending on their home life, work life, relationships with the people that they lived with, and their relationships with their friends too. Sometimes it felt as if the media and community members felt it was young people's fault. Adults would criticise those out and about and hold them responsible for the rates of COVID in communities. The unknown has been one of the most challenging things about the pandemic, not knowing if or when you would see people again, not knowing how to be there for people, and not knowing how to get support. For some, especially young carers, those with LGBT identities and care experienced young people, home became a very challenging place to be for young people.
Throughout the rest of 2020, the Youth Council were involved in things like the Community Planning Partnership meeting, delivering the Know Your Rights campaign, including workshops and competitions, an SQA National Focus Group, staff interviews and scoring panel for the Summit Saltire Awards, instrumental music service consultation, and creating a Climate for Beginners workshop. Because the pandemic changed most organisations' day-to-day operations, it was not possible to progress many of the actions we included in our original ward action plans until later 2020 when things started to reopen and get back to normal. Some of the actions weren't relevant anymore. Some, especially the ones about online learning, had been achieved. Some weren't relevant anymore, and some just hadn't been possible because things aren't back to normal totally yet. In saying this, some things were possible. These looked like beach cleans and cleanups that were carried out across the whole region, being involved in the Inclusive Play Park project in Annan, working alongside Garrick Housing Project in partnership with DGHP, and peer-led engagement around Stranraer Ramp Park. There will be a full report brought to the council that outlines all the actions in the next few months.
Starting the year with another national lockdown, we took our meetings back online. Some of the highlights of 2021 so far have been receiving funding for a dodgeball league in Annan, a regional project looking at what's it like being young in 2021, and funding to create environmental packs that support young people to make environmentally friendly lifestyle changes. Before the Scottish Parliament elections in May, we worked to create a campaign to encourage young voters to register to vote and work to organise 2 hustings events for all constituency candidates standing for election. We wanted to make sure that young people have the option to vote, the opportunity to put questions to candidates, and the information to make an informed choice on polling day. Another highlight was becoming a co-production group for the Scottish Government's Summer of Play funding. From May to June, we worked to establish the priorities for the funding and scored over 80 applications to decide which projects were awarded money to deliver free opportunities for young people throughout the summer. We also inspected several projects to make sure what they were delivering was having an impact on the people who participated. The most recent project came about due to a growing concern amongst young people of CAMs locally. From speaking with young people in our communities, we felt that there were issues with people's perceptions of CAMs, that in some cases were stopping people getting the help they needed. After meeting with the service, we've been working to get the views of young people so that services can better understand. Over 200 young people with experience as a service have participated in our consultation over the summer, and the findings of this are being taken to the Children and Young People's Mental Health Strategic Group for consideration. Although in the early stages, another highlight is that we've started working in partnership with Sport Scotland to develop a proposal for a new project for the region focused on health and wellbeing. And also in the second annual joint meeting between the Youth Council and Dumfries and Galloway Council, which took place in September.
So it's been a longer than expected term and totally different to how any of us could have imagined it being, but there has been a lot of learning from our time as the first Youth Council membership. Our priority for us next term is about regular engagement with decision makers every 3 to 4 months at least, to make sure young people and elected members can build a good working relationship in local communities. Something else we know is changing for the better is when our elections take place. Previously, the elections were in March, which resulted in a stalled start for most members due to exams. With the change in election dates, the new Youth Council members will be able to hit the ground running when they are elected in just a couple of weeks. Our first membership finishes next week, and we're looking forward to seeing how the Youth Council and Community Planning Partnership work together over the next term. Overall, we are proud of the work undertaken by the Youth Council over the last 2 years. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you, Hannah and Ellie. Can I invite members of the Community Planning Board or indeed the Youth Council if they want to ask any questions, and I'll just pass the questions back to Hannah and Ellie. Could you either type in speak? If you can get access, I know some people have got problems with access to chat. So either use your hand function or the speak function, right, speak, if you wish to ask any questions. Okay, I've got somebody, yes, Liz Manson.
Thank you very much. One of the things that local government is looking at the moment is trying to increase the diversity of the people who stand for elections, and obviously we've got elections coming up next May. So do you have any thoughts about how we could do that, how we could attract young people perhaps, how we could get them involved in some of that work? Because you've obviously got a very diverse range of people standing and involved in the Youth Council. Thank you.
I think a big thing about I'll put my camera on, about getting young people involved is making things more youth friendly. A lot of language in places like that is quite difficult to understand, and it puts a lot of young people off in a sense. So I feel like making things more simple and like not in a patronizing way, but just in a way that young people can be engaging easier.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I was also just going to add that like young people don't know like a lot about local politics. It's not in the education system often, and like so they've not got that background knowledge to actually understand what it is they're signing up to do as well.
Okay, and would that be something that we could maybe work with the Youth Council about? I mean, obviously, from a council perspective, we're interested in the elections next year, but I think more widely, you know, getting a greater diversity in any aspect of public life, like all the different boards or, you know, housing management committees and tenants groups and things like that. It's something that we'd be really interested in working with you in. Thank you.
I'm sure the next Youth Council would be very happy to work.
Yeah, just to see how we can get better at that sort of across us all. Thank you.
Thanks. Helen.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say thanks to Hannah and Ellie. That was really interesting, and it's really good to see you guys, you know, the Youth Council taking such a proactive approach to things that are important to you. Comment rather than a question. I really like the thing about not just checking in with young people, but actually incorporating them in the development. And it kind of made me think of, in the third sector, the sort of nothing about us without us sort of philosophy that we have. So that really resonated, and it's important to keep at the front of our minds. And also really pleased to see that you've sort of done that survey and taken it about CAMS. I think that's a really important point, and good on you for taking it forward, because it's so important for the region. And I'll look forward to seeing the results of the you know, the next steps as the people consider your findings. So thanks for that. And thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Nick Morris.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you very much for the presentation, which I found very interesting. And it's so refreshing to see the talent that we have available across the region that might at some time in the future be our leaders of the system and helping us to guide our way through as I get into my old age. I'm keen that the NHS engages with young people to discuss how we ensure services are more sensitive to their needs. And we had planned prior to COVID to hold some of our board meetings in the academies, one in Stranraer and one more locally to Dumfries. Unfortunately, COVID got in the way of us doing that. But the intention would have been to hold the public meeting in the school in one of their big rooms, and then potentially invite pupils to join us for a conversation thereafter. But I'm not always sure if that's the best way to engage young people in a conversation about what they see as their relationship with the healthcare system. So I just wonder if you have any thoughts about how we can develop a really good, strong dialogue with young people that makes sense to them and isn't seen as patronising in any way, and genuinely leads to some changes that might take place.
I think like it's about like having loads of opportunities for like young people to contribute, like not just say, oh well, I've done one session in Stranraer, so that's every young person in Dumfries and Galloway's opinion on that. and it stands for the same with like whether it's like the NHS or whether it's just like do loads of different focus groups, like what they did with the community conversations for the council budget, having loads of different things, and just providing young people that opportunity, but also not being afraid that if maybe a young person is sat and maybe not contributing, they've probably got loads of thoughts, and maybe like just follow up with them a wee bit afterwards and say, look, like thank you for coming, but like is there anything you actually wanted to say that maybe they weren't comfortable saying at the time as well?
Yeah, I agree with Hannah on that. I feel like the more versatile you are with the opportunities to engage young people, the more young people you'll engage from different backgrounds, different areas and things like that. So it's more like to include everyone. It's like many different opportunities rather than having one set focus thing at one time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so what I guess you're saying is we need to be consistent and continuous with our conversations with you rather than just making it a one-off, and then allow for some adaptable processes so that people can contribute in their own ways. And if they don't contribute in one place, they may well contribute in a different way if you open up different styles.
Definitely, and
okay,
especially
that's very helpful.
Especially connectivity issues as well in the region, like that would really benefit, especially like because not a lot of people have a strong internet signal as well, so like that also contributes, but also some people can only contribute online because the transport from where they stay is rubbish, so they can't actually physically get. So it's about having that balance as well, and like having conversations with like older young people as well. Sorry.
So no, just noticed that on the chat line, Jane Maitland said, "Is online engagement best?" So I guess it'd be useful to ask you now. You know, do young people prefer that actually you could meet face to face in groups, or are you quite content that online engagement is the way to go forward?
I don't think like one size fits all. Like I don't think that applies here. Like it depends. Like it's the same with adults. Like some people prefer to meet in person, and some people are quite happy joining online, and it just depends on the individual, I would say, and like and the circumstances of the people that you're engaging with as well.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for that.
Thanks. I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to ask a question. Just briefly, a piece of information. The council is going to be putting in, our education officers are going to be putting in a response to the government's consultation on curriculum for excellence and Education Scotland, and obviously we would be very pleased to hear the views of young people in terms of your experience of curriculum for excellence. So just really to, I think Gillian Bryson, the director, will be approaching you fairly soon. And we're obviously aware that the elections are imminent for the Youth Council, but we would certainly appreciate your views on curriculum for excellence. Thanks. Okay, thanks for a very interesting presentation. If we can go on to the third item, which is on key issues for young people in the Youth Council, and I'll hand back to Hannah and Ellie for that.
There has been a lot of consultations with young people on various issues throughout the last few years. 10,000 Voices and the impact of COVID are the two big examples of this. Throughout our terms, we have been working with young people in our communities and with each other to identify issues and think over solutions that could help make things better for young people in Dumfries and Galloway. We believe there will be a big focus on the following things over the next couple of years. The first is young people's access to mental health services or general support services. Mental health has been a top priority amongst young people, as shown in both 10,000 Voices and the impact of COVID. But it's not just about young people's own mental health. Throughout the pandemic, young people were regularly worried about their peers' and parents' mental well-being, and although it has been something people felt was important, the pandemic has meant more people than ever are struggling with their mental health. And there is a need for for more services that provide support for young people. The Youth Council recently did a consultation that engaged with 222 young people across the region about their perception of CAMHS, and we believe the findings evidence a real need for change.
The second thing we believe that will be a priority for the next term will be building on what the Youth Council has achieved so far and making sure that young people's voices are heard in decision making at all levels. As a UNCRC has been agreed to be incorporated into Scots law, this will change the expectation on councils and public bodies and how they will involve and work alongside young people. Young people can't exercise their rights if they don't know they have them, and in our view, more needs to be done to make sure there's a greater understanding of what rights mean in reality for young people.
Environmental issues and climate change are a growing priority for young people across Dumfries and Galloway, Scotland and the UK. Based on what young people in our communities have told us, this is something more and more people are becoming aware of and want to take action on. The future is something a lot of people identified as something they worried all or most of the time about within the Impact of COVID report. Uncertainty about exams, employment and volunteering options and opportunities to progress into higher or further education are things that are a concern for young people. Before the pandemic, it wasn't uncommon for young people to be told they didn't have the experience needed to get a job. And although things have opened back up, there is now less volunteering opportunities for those people to gain experience they need to get a job. And sometimes that can feel like a vicious cycle.
The final issue that we think will continue to be a priority for the Youth Council is transport and connectivity. It's excellent that the Scottish Government are introducing the free bus travel for under 21s in January 2022. However, in Dumfries and Galloway, cost is not the only barrier for young people when it comes to using public transport. Many communities are not connected and often don't run evening or weekend services. Communities like Langham, they're not accessible, and so whilst it's great that it's more accessible in terms of money, there is still more that can be done to make sure that young people can work, study and live in the region instead of moving away. In terms of the internet and access to reliable internet, the pandemic showed that this is something not available to everyone yet, and unless this is addressed, it will continue to be a barrier for young people in terms of employment and education.
In saying all of this, though, we don't think there's any issue that isn't important to young people. There are many things we have highlighted. Are the issues young people have agreed is a worry or concern, but there are other things like food, money, caring responsibilities and homelessness that are affecting smaller numbers of young people in a big way. So we're now going to break into two groups for 15 minutes to discuss a few questions. The questions are: what are the key messages for your organisation/sector from the 10,000 Voices research and the impact of COVID on young people? What would you like the Youth Council to focus on in the coming years? And how could your organisation work with youth councillors?
To go first and then I'll follow on.
To go first, thank you. So in terms of our feedback about what the key messages for our organisations and sectors were from the 10,000 Voices research and the impact of COVID, the things that we really focused on were about connectivity, and that's transport and digital. We were talking about the challenges perhaps of some rural areas not having particularly good connectivity in either of these. But there's perhaps an opportunity for us to share better, to understand better what partners have and what expertise and facilities they have, and share that better across the region. What we would like the Youth Council to focus on in the coming years, really two areas came up for that, about mental health and well-being and perhaps self-care, and the connectivity issue, both transport and digital. And in terms of how we can work with youth councillors, I think there was 3 aspects of that. One is continuing to work at strategic level, and perhaps this sort of forum where we have joint sessions at youth council and board level. In terms of localities and some of the work that's taking place about place, is certainly something that we would see the ward officers, the ward councillors getting involved in with partners at local level. And the third element is about making sure that we've got ongoing communication and dialogue. Perhaps we could support the induction of any new youth councillors, but also find appropriate routes to get information flows from all of our partners so that youth council's got the kind of heads up about what's coming. But we don't want to flood the youth council with information. So we perhaps need to do a little bit of work just about how the flow of information can work best for the youth council. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Lida, is it okay if I just follow on with the second group?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the focus on the second group was really around, sorry, I'll just put my camera on. The discussion really focused on mental health and well-being. So there was a range of discussions from partners and young people. There was a concern that perhaps young people are being turned away or not having early enough access to support services. And that was something that Nick Morris has taken on board to go and have a look at. But also Nick suggested that he was really keen to do some detailed work with young people around support mechanisms, creating empathy, kindness, that culture change, and trying to support young people in their communities. There was a comment regarding the impact of social media, in that it can be positive, but also can create a great deal of hate as well. And that's a big concern out there that we see every day. Again, Claire Thirlwell really keen to work with young people to give them more opportunities to talk and express how they're feeling. The fire service are currently doing quite a lot of engagement, or starting to do engagement when things start to open up with young people. And James has got quite a few things to say on the suicide prevention topic, which is just coming up shortly. And finally, Councillor Davidson noted about the concerns about just adjusting from COVID and going back into normality, and really keen to help take forward youth provision and getting back to some normality. So I would say those are the key issues that came up in the discussion. So but if anyone thinks I've missed anything, please chip in. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody indicating that they want to add to anything, what Liz or Stephen have said, so nobody's indicating they have anything further. If we can go on to the next session, which is a consultation on suicide prevention strategy. And I'm going to ask Claire Thirlwell from NHS Dumfries and Galloway to give us a short presentation to introduce the topic. Claire.
Thank you, Lida. Abby, are you able to bring the presentation up? I know you're trying to work on the video. Brilliant, thank you. So first of all, I thought I'd better just introduce myself to those who might not know me. I'm Claire Thirlwell, I'm a health and wellbeing specialist, and I work in the Directorate of Public Health as a joint role between the local authority and the NHS. As part of that role, I do take forward a strategic lead at looking after our suicide prevention strategy locally. Could you tap forward, Abby, for me? So what I thought would be really useful, we know that suicide prevention is a national priority. There's been national strategies since 2002-3, and more laterally we've got our Every Life Matters, which was launched in 2018. And to some degree, nationally and locally, those both have had a kind of degree of success. We've seen nationally a reduction in suicide rates about 18%. And although our numbers are pretty small in Dumfries and Galloway, we always put a caveat to that, we have seen a kind of rough reduction of about 30%. Sadly, in 2020, 805 people died by suicide across Scotland. So 2020 is our last verified data, so it's the only data that we can actually share in kind of public forums. And sadly, 21 of those deaths happened in Dumfries and Galloway itself. So I think it's useful just to recognise that every death is a tragedy, that affects many more people, whether that's friends, families, communities, and there will actually be, as we've kind of just hinted at today through the different presentations, there's actually a higher level of distress across our communities in Dumfries and Galloway that we just need to kind of keep an eye on. As Nick pointed out earlier, deprivation and poverty is absolutely fundamentally a huge indicator in terms of risk, and we know that the risk is 3.5 times higher in our most deprived areas than it is in our least deprived areas. Our statistics show us, and always a caveat that there's always levels of distress, but the typical age range of people who are dying by suicide, certainly for males, 35 to 44 and 45 to 54. So I think previously there's been a bit of speculation it was younger people, but what we're seeing now is that that initial age range of young people are actually growing older, and we're seeing that kind of transition across accordingly. We know that there's a number of at-risk groups, people who have been bereaved by suicide. We know that men in particular, the last round of statistics showed us that 70% of our deaths were men in particular. We know that people experiencing mental illness or self-harm may have suicide ideation. And we know that prisoners in particular, there's a high risk there, especially in those early stages of release. And we also know that there's age-related suicides as well. So I think it's just to kind of keep a wee eye. We know that we've got a lot of work looking around that crisis, that support, that service, but as it's kind of been pointed out this morning, we really do need to look at those factors that are influencing people's distress, whether that's poverty, isolation, loneliness, unemployment and relationship difficulties. And I think it's just to kind of highlight as well that we've recognised that the pandemic has actually given us a further level of distress that we just need to keep a wee eye on. Abby, can you ping forward? So just to give a wee bit of a initiation about where we've been going in Dumfries and Galloway over the last 2 or 3 years, we've also got the national strategy, which is Every Life Matters. It's based on 10 action areas. It's based on the best evidence research and also stakeholder engagement. What I'll say is, as much as we've got those actions, again, it's just pointing out, again, it's about tackling inequalities and factors. So within those 10 actions, we've been working towards considering those. We recognise that there is a lot of great work that's happening across our region. There's a lot of work happening in different work streams, whether that's around our children and young people work streams, through the anti-poverty strategy, through our health and social care systems. And we wanted to make sure that any work that we do is complementary to those actions and provides supplementary action going forward. So we do have a multi-agency working group. It's got very good attendance. We've got third sector, fire service, police, prison, social work, mental health services, public health, all around the table. There's been some national local area guidance launched back in April there, and we're considering that guidance to see how we can actually stem and actually accentuate and make and strengthen our work going forward. So it's quite an exciting time for us. We've got a new national strategy, but there's an opportunity to kind of look at our own work as well. So I'll just go through some of the other action areas. So action 2 is about training, and this is probably one of my kind of key issues at the moment. We've had a level of distress across our region over the last 1.5 years, but unfortunately what happened was that all the national training programmes were put on hold due to licence agreements, which made it very, very hard and difficult for us in terms of trying to kind of reach out and try and support. We have been working with Public Health Scotland and NES. There's a whole framework that's been developed. There is some new training resources, and we've been working with them to try and test those resources going forward. So formed levels of awareness about community groups, and we've managed to reach maybe about 12 to 14 community groups over the last wee while, just to try and get that information out there as well. We're working at the moment, my biggest issue is about the training at the moment around skilled level for frontline staff, but we are trying to work on a solution for that going forward again with Public Health Scotland. We talk about awareness, some people not knowing where to go, how do they access help, how can we kind of tackle the stigma, the discrimination that goes around suicide prevention. Again, it's been a wee bit more difficult this year because of the engagement. We've not been able to kind of do what we'd normally do in terms of getting out to people. There's been quite a strong social media presence, unfortunately, and I'm taking on board the digital access, etc. around about it. But previously, we've had some really good partnerships with Breathing Space. So in 2019, we were the region of focus. We had an event. We launched their new theme here in Dumfries and Galloway. We did a lot of engagement with our communities. We targeted sports groups. We did some work with college. We did the Wigtonshire Book Festival as well, just to get some information out there. And that actually saw an uptake, a rise in uptake in that service of about 20% in the referrals from D&G. And I just want to kind of push forward the fact that Samaritans as well have got a bit of a soft spot there. They have just actually launched their new outreach team, and we're really looking forward to working with the Samaritans to see how we can actually take that forward. So Action 4 and 5 is mostly about crisis care and supporting people who've been affected by suicide. So nationally, Action 4, there's 3 different test sites who've been developed to kind of look at that support, bereavement support, and the different models about how that could actually be taken forward. And we're doing a wee bit of work, which I'll come back to in Action 910. Next kind of alluded to the fact that we need to kind of be looking earlier about early intervention and how do we respond to distress, but we do have our distress brief intervention programme. Unfortunately, it's for 16 plus, but basically what that will say is frontline staff having a very kind of opportunity trained to kind of respond to distress, but there's another tier where people can be referred into a 2-week programme, and Support in Mind Scotland have just literally got the contract for that, and they're in the early stages developing that locally. So Action 6 is our technology. This is an interesting one, but what we did manage to do in the early stages of the pandemic was to develop a Prevent app. So it's an app that could be downloaded smartphones, etc. It's got information on a whole range of services. It's got information for people about how to support people affected by suicide, and there's also an opportunity for people to be a bit safety planning, to look at things that kind of can keep people safe and well round about it. And since the launch there, we've had about 400 people accessing that launch. So Action 7 is about our target groups. This takes into consideration there's a whole range of work across the region, round about it. We do try and kind of feed into different work streams going forward. 2017-19, we had a very strong work programme around the farming community, so it's really good to see that Sheena's won an award for her work going forward. We do try to target some work towards men, mostly through sports clubs and through our workplaces, and we've got some very strong links in with our community justice partnership and also our local prison service, just to support where we can. So Action 8, children and young people, and I'll hold my hand up on this one. I think we've recognised there's some very strong work programmes going forward, so we haven't specifically done any target work, but there's an opportunity to kind of strengthen that going forward. But we do try and make sure we've got the strategic links and share information and just support as much as we can do. So I'm quite excited to see where the conversations lie today about how we can actually take some better work going forward. So 9 and 10 is mostly about data and suicide multi-agency reviews. So sadly, what our data tells us, there's actually quite a high number of people who are dying who are actually not in contact with services at any point. Reviews up to very, very recently have been kind of predominantly around mental health service contacts, but we are in D&G one of 3 test sites who will be looking at developing reviews so that we can actually review the circumstances of every suicide within the region. After a very long time, and some people here on the call will share my grievance, it took us a long time to get information sharing protocols signed off, but we've got there and we're now actually progressing that work forward. So the idea that we're looking at circumstances, we'd be looking at patterns, and we'd be looking at some of the learning, which will then go on to kind of inform our work going forward. And we're working very closely with the COSLA lead at this moment in time to develop that work going forward. And there'll be a small piece of work which will be looking at how we can support families as part of that process. So that's a very quick snapshot. I'm hoping it just gives you enough to kind of think about how we go forward in our next section in terms of the discussion points for the strategy engagement. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. We're now going to split into 2 discussion groups again, this time led by Claire and Richard Smith from NHS Dumfries and Galloway, and they'll be for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have the feedback from those groups. So I think if Jennifer can do the honours again this time. Thanks. Okay, is that everybody back in the main room? I know our group was in the middle of a discussion point. we were transferred back. Can I now hand over to Claire and Richard just to give us a feedback on the key messages from the discussion points?
Claire, I'm happy to. I was taking the notes if you want. Is that okay? If you want, you can speak if you want. I've got a list.
No, I'll let you speak. Thank you.
Right. Okay. No. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, we probably could have done with a bit longer on this item. Certainly had some deep discussion on it. So it started with Nick Morris just highlighting some of the difficulties in the past in terms of access, and particularly secondary schools, to have these discussions. Sorry, the focus for the group was around prevention, early intervention, and crisis. And that led on to some of our young people just sharing some of their experiences in terms of, it's really important for them to have discussions around suicide prevention, early intervention within schools. Stresses change on a regular basis. Exam stress was mentioned, and it should be higher up on the agenda in terms of schools, just to get people talking about it as well. Support regular discussions. Just appreciating young people's circumstances changing on a regular basis. There was one example which was quite worrying, actually, that young person in third year, and there hasn't been one chat around that suicide topic through PSE classes. So that was a real worry. James from the fire service gave us some examples on the champions programme within fire stations, mental health and wellbeing champions, and that's working well as a signposting mechanism. And perhaps that's something for schools. But Mark Malloy highlighted in the chat about the youth information workers in every secondary school as well, and and that's a good resource which can be used. John Evans from SOCIS also offered to help with training, producing training, mental health toolkit, and just that offer out there to work with partners surrounding that. And also Councillor Davidson, appreciating there's a devolved schools management in place, however, feeling that there really maybe needs to be a higher level of awareness amongst head teachers to allow the integration into the curriculum to help take on board some of these issues. So that's what I captured. Claire, is there anything else?
No, I think you've done a great job there, Stephen, in capturing that. Thank you.
Hand over to Richard for the other group. Richard.
Yep, great, thank you. Yes, well, we had a really good discussion as well, and the main topic we covered was stigma and how do we tackle stigma, and there was a really good discussion. And first of all, apologise to our last contributor who unfortunately got cut off mid-flow while she was making some really good points. So apologies to that, Ellie. But if you want to message them in, we'll certainly take note. So there was some really good points about tackling stigma, about creating safe spaces for people to talk, for people being listened to. Some of the feedback was that people get frustrated that they're not being listened to by professionals, whether they're going for help, and they just feel that they're not listened to by professionals. So creating a safe space by talking about it in various locations, whether it's the workplace, whether it's schools, whether it's just even kind of in the canteen, whatever, just having areas of topic that people do talk about it. So it is okay for folk to bring it up. For tackling the actual kind of conversation, the stigma still about people don't want to raise the issue in the first place. There was the point made about talking about it in school, in various different kind of classes and different forums, and giving people information on where they can get support, where they can get help, where they can get more quality information that they can rely on. And whether that was online or through chat forums, whatever, but to make sure that it's a kind of safe, responsible area to get more information, and so that people feel that if they do want more, they can get it, and get it at different times. So yeah, overall it was a really good discussion. Unfortunately, I'm sure it could have went on longer, but we have got some really good points there, and I'm sure myself and Claire I'll take them away and see what we can do more about. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Claire and Richard, for that. We now have actually an additional feature to the advertised programme. We're going to view a short video featuring one of our board members, Sheena Horner. Sheena last week won the British Farming Hero Award for initiative aimed at improving the mental health of members of the agricultural community, and we felt that was very appropriate to the topics under discussion today. Congratulations to Sheila. Unfortunately, Sheila can't be with us today to hear our congratulations, but we'll certainly make sure those are conveyed to her. And could somebody share the video with us, please?
So I started running round about here. And when I was out one day, I just started thinking about how much you felt better after a run, and you kind of switched off from everyday life and you weren't thinking about COVID or the next meeting that you were going to do online. And I just thought, I wonder if we could do something with this to help highlight the benefits of running and walking on rural mental health. So I sent a message to a friend and it just all started from there. So the whole idea with Run 1000 was to get 5 teams to compete against each other, but in a friendly way, and while highlighting the benefit of running or walking on your mental health. There's 31 days in January, multiplied 31 by a marathon every day, which was 26 miles, and that took us round about 1,000. We rounded it up to that, which I thought was a really good target. How wrong was I? Because England and Wales both hit 1,000 miles in the first day. To put it into perspective, we ran round the world 2.5 times. That's the distance that we covered, and there was just under 1,000 people took part.
Well, as a keen runner already, I decided to join in because January is such a horrible month, but I'm a great believer in the mental well-being of our profession and in farming, to join in and get outside.
It was a good way to bring the farming community together, to get involved in some running and to raise some money for a really good cause.
I just wanted to raise a little bit of money for these charities because they were really struggling as well. They had fundraising events throughout the year, and because of COVID they couldn't do it, so I thought what a great way to get people out and about and also raise some funds. And if we'd reached 10,000 I would have been absolutely ecstatic, but it just kept going up and up, and it reached 52,000 in the end when we closed it. So everything was run through Strava, and that's how we recorded it, and each team again had a private Strava group, and it was just a camaraderie, egging each other on, saying, come on, we can do this is what Team Wales did last week, can we beat them next week, etc.
So I think it was absolutely brilliant because there was social media, we were sharing it on Strava so you could keep an eye on everybody. It got a bit of competition up, everybody wanted to beat somebody else, but most of all it was just getting out and being part of a team again.
I started walking backwards and forwards to work, so I was doing 7-mile walks, and then you got a word from somebody in Wales, go you, the early morning start, and you're thinking that's lovely, and then you'd reciprocate that with them and somebody else, and then you started getting to know these people that were all on the same journey as you, if you like, and it was just so positive and uplifting, and some lifelong friends have been made from it.
Sheena deserves the Farming Hero Award just because she managed to get us all off our backsides and working together.
I think what she did, in developing the Run 1000 campaign was just, it really boosted morale and encouraged people to get involved. And I think, she's done a great job.
She's infectious and, absolutely brilliant at it, and 100% deserves it.
If anybody can come up with an idea, a half-hearted idea, she'll make it a full-blown idea. She just oozes optimism. I have a motto in my life, and this sounds like it's a cliche and I've made it up, I'm not, but I want to be more like Sheena, be more Sheena. That's the way forward in life.
It is fantastic, but as I keep saying, it's not me. Maybe I came up with the idea, but it's for everybody. It's all those people that took part and came on board with me.
I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I just thank everybody for their helpful contributions and the very interesting discussions that we've had. Can I wish the youth councillors who are standing again the best of luck, but also the best of luck to all the youth councillors, including those who are not standing again, and best of luck in all your endeavours going forward. The board will meet again with Youth Council in the future, and I'm sure that's something that board members will all look forward to. So thank you very much, everybody.